We have a lot of speakers that are helping us with this webinar series, and then we have some sponsors as well. So we just wanted to take a second to thank the folks that are coming along. Today we've got Lynne Strickland, and she's from the Canadian Home Builders Association. So I wanted to take a minute to introduce her while she gets set up. She joined their team earlier this year with a multidisciplinary background in the built environment, from indoor environmental quality to design and construction. She works on initiatives that strive for scalable net zero solutions, such as the NRCan-funded National Applied RD&D project, which is towards cost-effective net zero energy-ready residential renovations, which is exactly what we were working on in our program, so we thought it would be a good fit. Prior to joining the Canadian Home Builders Association, she worked as a senior construction project manager on Parliament Hill with the Centre Block Rehabilitation Program, overseeing heritage removals, BIM recording of the building, and designated substance abatement. She's also spent 4 years in the residential sector as project manager with a design, build, and renovation company, and many years as an indoor environmental specialist, specializing in indoor air quality. A registered interior designer, a lead AP, a well AP, and PMP, Lynne's focus is on integrating the best of all aspects of known capabilities and innovative solutions to advance both scalability and impact. Based outside of Ottawa in farm country, she enjoys human-powered adventures by bike, hike, kayak, or canoe, and is hoping to add a retrofitted off-grid vehicle to her endeavors. So without further ado, Miss Lynne Strickland.
No, we can't hear you right now, Lynne.
There we go. How's that?
You sound perfect, Lynne. Take it away.
Always love it when the screens always move around and you get to have that fun. So thank you to everyone who is here at this session. I really appreciate your time tonight. And there's a lot of information that's here, and I'm hoping that we can engage and share and allow for more information sharing afterwards, because it sounds like there's a lot of great work being done in your area, and I'm hoping I can share from our area. So I'm with the Canadian Home Builders Association, which is situated in Ottawa, which is the unceded traditional Algonquin territory of the Anishinaabe. And in this context of sharing information, it is with respect for both the land and the people of this land. And the Indigenous peoples have a lot to give in terms of knowledge to us. And I'm hoping that in sharing of this information, that we can further the goals of adapting to our new world and our new climates and our energy goals and efficiency goals. So it is with that mindset of protecting the earth and providing a sustainable future that is the drive behind a lot of the energy efficiency models, but particularly the net zero model that CHBA has been working on over the past 8 years. We have a membership of builders and renovators, energy advisors, industry partners, municipal partners, that we look to provide guidance in terms of what will sustainably and affordably get us to a point where we can enjoy clean, healthy, and a thriving earth. So in terms of the impact of net zero homes, there is the distinction of net zero emissions and net zero energy, and they are not always directly correlated. In this context of the presentation I'm giving tonight, it is net zero energy homes is what we work with, but there is a correlation, although not always direct, to greenhouse gas emissions. And so there is that balance of mutual goals between those two. The efforts that we're making on not just net zero homes, but quite recently on net zero renovations, which is the project that I'm working on, is to address the fact that there are over 15 million existing homes in Canada, and most of those are there is at least half of those that are older, but most of those even built to current code can improve their energy performance. In terms of some of the background of when we're talking about energy efficiency discussions and models and codes have been around for decades. The R2000 development. Where we are now is that because of the 2030 and 2050 goals and targets for reducing our energy consumption and reducing our emissions, is that there are continual steps towards net zero or net zero ready. The existing national building code is considered at this moment, if we look at that as our baseline of from there, what are the improvements that we are looking at? The Ontario Building Code Standard of 2017, if following that standard brings you up to about a 10% improvement over the code, building to code. If we look at an Energy Star for new homes, you're looking at a 20% improvement. With net zero and net zero ready, we are targeting between 70 and 80% better for a net zero ready, and looking towards 100% net zero, which means you produce as much as you consume. The idea behind these stepped improvements, and something that the Canadian Home Builders Association is very keen on promoting, is that these labels are they're voluntary before they come into code, so that it can be proven, as you have done with your house that you have been working on. And we've had examples of houses and retrofits, but it has to be proven that we have the capacity, that we have the technology before it becomes mandatory in code. A lot of people are familiar with the EnerGuide Rating System. The old system from about, I think we changed to the new system about 6 years ago. So if you had an EnerGuide assessment, so when an energy advisor comes to your house, they'll do a blower door test, and they're looking for how much energy you consume, what the air tightness is of your home, and they give you a rating. In the new model for the EnerGuide Rating System, you actually get your gigajoules as opposed to a number of where you sit from 0 to 100. So in this model of the new one, they also break it down into where that energy is being consumed. So we're looking at space heating is typically the largest part. And then they also look at what you're looking at for cooling, water heating, ventilation. And that forms the basis of the Net Zero Home Labeling Program, is that we use the EnerGuide rating for our establishment of where we're at and where we're wanting to go. When we look at houses that have been built since 1990, the code from then was allowed for houses, they were typically around this area of 140 to 145 gigajoules per year of consumption. If we compare that to where we are now, we're down to about 100 gigajoules per house for a new house built to current code. But when we compare that to what we can achieve with net zero ready, then we look at further improvements beyond that. One thing to note, though, is that more than half, or almost half, of that 15 million is older than 1983 stock, and their energy consumption is considerably higher. When we look at houses that were built between 1960 and 1977, we're looking at an average of 342 gigajoules per year. When we look at the average home that's built to current code, we're looking at about 105. But what we are looking at with net zero housing, with the move towards energy efficiency, is that we reduce that energy level even further, that we take the greenhouse gas emissions down, we reduce operational costs. With the studies that we've done since the Net Zero Home Program was launched in 2015, is that in addition to that, it's never just about energy, and it shouldn't be just about energy or emissions, people live in these homes. And one of the things that we found is that the feedback that we get is like, yes, the energy is less. Yes, my operational costs are less. But what I really like about the house is I like the improved indoor air quality. I like the comfort it provides with lack of drafts. And I like the fact that you don't hear the outdoor noise. And that comes down to the methodology of how you upgrade that house to a net zero or a net zero ready house. When we look at what we can be achieved with a net zero ready home, what we're looking at here is that the occupant load, the one that we have the most control over, now is the bigger part. When we look at the space heating of an average home built to code, it is between heating and cooling, it is over 50% of your energy consumption. Through building science and improving and good construction methodology, we can get that space heating load down to 26% of your total amount of less than half of the total consumption.
Lynn,
Mhm.
can I just interrupt you for a question that came through the chat?
Absolutely. I can't quite see the chat, so please do. Yes.
Okay. Can you just, while we're here, just describe what a gigajoule is?
Okay, so a gigajoule, actually, do I have there we go. So glad I got that question because I had that ready. So a gigajoule is 1 billion joules of energy. And does this come through clearly? Because when I'm looking at it on my screen, the blue on the gray is not the greatest choice.
We can see it.
Okay, so the equivalent of a 1 gigajoule of energy is these sort of things that we can relate to. So when we look at vacuuming your whole house for, for 230 hours, watching this, that's 1 gigajoule. So when we're looking at the comparison of the 43 gigajoules to 100 gigajoules, this gives some sort of tangible context to what that gigajoule means. Does that help?
Yeah, so it's a measurement of how much energy is used, and this
It's a measurement of energy. It used to be in, there's different, you can have cubic meters of gas is another measurement of energy. You've also got kilowatt hours, but the gigajoule is a measurement that has been adopted as the standardized now with EnerCan. So that's the one that we've been using for our program.
Perfect, thank you.
And joule is a energy term. It's a transfer of energy. Okay, that's a great question because yes, it for the context of what does that actually mean, that was a very good question. So this is where I'm going to go straight into the video that I have here, and I hope it runs, and then we'll get into the definitions of what CHBA calls a net zero home. And of course, it's a little bit slower in the share mode.
Lynn, is it working on your screen there?
I am very sorry. I should have checked because I was just watching the video, so it was not coming through for you.
Not a problem. It's just if you share one screen versus your entire screen, it'll track when you click a link like that.
Okay, just hang on just a sec.
Not a problem.
All right. I do apologize for that. And we're just going to stick to the non-video component. Can you see my screen again?
Yes, you're all good.
Okay. Well, that kind of sucks. I was really looking forward to sharing those videos.
Videos always end up being tricky, I'll tell you.
They are, yes, they are indeed. So we're going to be going through what we define as a CHBA net zero home. And to go back to the idea of you build a really good house such that it is very energy efficient. It is designed and modeled and constructed so that in the final product, you have reduced your energy load to a point that you can then offset it by on-site renewables. Typically, what we're looking at is that the on-site renewables are often photovoltaics or PVs or solar energy. So depending on your home, what and where it's facing, whether it's a good south or west facing roof, there is a model that shows that you can produce as much energy through your photovoltaics as you are going to consume over the average for the year. So it is not an off-grid house, but what it is a house that can generate that energy equivalent over your annual consumption. When we talk about a net zero ready house, what this is one that has been designed exactly the same. It has been renovated exactly the same as a net zero home, but the photovoltaics are not yet installed. And typically that is also due to affordability or timing and that sort of thing. So one of the things that we at CHBA also recognize is that not all grids are the same, and not all opportunities are the same in terms of energy sources. So our program is what we call fuel source agnostic. You can have a net zero home that operates on gas, and you can have a net zero home that is completely electrified. Does that, any questions on that? Okay. So the Net Zero Home Labeling Program is one of these voluntary programs where we seek out with the industry to prove the concept and prove its viability and that it can be done and that there is the capacity to take this on. So right now, our home labeling program, which started in 2015, 2017, has over 1,000 homes labeled. What we're finding now is that we have production builders who have done some of these homes. They are qualified net zero home builders. And what they are doing now is they are making it mandatory within their business model to make all of their homes net zero. So we are seeing hundreds of homes coming down. So it's really escalating at scale. When we look at renovating to net zero, there are some fundamental methodologies that we like to encourage, which is look at the structural integrity first, remove any hazardous materials, and this could be anything from asbestos, vermiculite, mold, anything like that, radon, deal with radon issues to make sure that the house itself is safe. When you do your renovation work, make sure that it is durable and quality work. And then you also look at the energy efficiency and indoor air quality. When we look at going to net zero, again, the one thing that I really would like for everyone to take home is that it is not just about the energy. It is not just about the emissions. It's about the people who live in the house. So this is where the house as a system is absolutely critical for making sure that the occupants of the house are benefiting from that really good construction and from that really well thought out process of how do we get from where we are to where we want to be, where we have lowered the energy consumption, but we have actually greatly improved the indoor environment for the occupant. Part of what we use in the Net Zero Home Labeling program, it is what is called the integrated design process. And one of these things is whenever you've been in a place or had, or a piece of equipment, it could be a product, it could be a place where you sit there and you go, who designed this thing? Whoever designed this never had to use it. And that's what the integrated design process is designed to not have as a result. And what this is talking to the end user, bringing in the stakeholders, the people who are making decisions, who need that input, bringing them all together during the design phase, so that when you get to the construction phase, everybody knows what their part is, so that you can achieve, not just achieve the goal, but you get those synergies, you get those cost-effective work, you get the advantages of knowing, oh, that ductwork is going to interfere with this pipe that has to come in. So let's work together and streamline it and make it possible. A lot of times we have what we call sunken costs, where you do a renovation and the gas, gets redirected into this way. And then, a few years later, you want to put in a heat recovery ventilator, but there's pipelines now in the way. And now you have to undo something costing more and redo it to allow for the next system to come in to optimize that house. So the integrated design process is absolutely critical in providing the best result and the best solution that applies to your particular home. So there was a quick discussion at the beginning, or in the introduction, about the work that we're doing on with NRCan to do with renovations. And what it is that we had a pilot where we tested out net zero home philosophy on renovations. That became we had 6 proven models, and I'll just show a little bit more about the profiles. So when we talk about taking an existing level of energy consumption, bringing it down to net zero ready, offsetting it with photovoltaics, and bringing it down to zero. So there were 6 homes that 3 were renovated to net zero ready and 3 were renovated to full net zero. What this project is doing is it is looking at doing 100 to 150 homes across Canada in different climate zones to demonstrate and to really address the barriers of cost, of capacity in terms of the knowledge. We are looking at training renovators, training energy advisors, training installers and contractors, so that they can all bring this house as a system mentality and net zero knowledge to the housing industry. All right, so that was a little gap in there where I thought the video was running and it was not. These are a couple of resources that are available through CHBA, is that our builder manual and renovators manual. But we have a lot more resources available, and all of our team members are thrilled to share whatever we have to help go. And I did want to point out that London is participating in the project that we have. And so I'm excited to work with London, but I'm also very excited to hear about the projects that you're working on here.
Thank you very much, Lynn. We can open the floor for any questions. If anybody wants to turn their screen on or take their microphone off mute and just chat, or you're welcome to put it into the chat box if you'd like to as well. It would be nice to see some people's faces, but it's up to you. We do have a question that we had written down earlier, and we were hoping that you could answer. What is the most, like, how do you find out if your home is an ideal candidate for the program or not?
that actually is something that what is one of the first asks. We do have an ideal candidate checklist that we're developing. We do have one in existence that our energy advisors use to go through. In general, what you're looking for is to go to full net zero, you're looking for the capability of your roof. So simple roof lines obviously have better capacity, really interesting Queen Anne style, very, you know, all these different types have very minimal and varying roof lines. But the other thing is that to maximize the cost effectiveness, you're looking at not undoing recently done work. So a lot of times what will show up is that, you know, there's some delayed major work projects. So when we're looking at ideal net zero home retrofit candidates, you're looking at ones that are structurally sound, that that you have the capability to undertake the insulating and energy improvements to the house, and that you have that there isn't this what I call this sunken cost, where let's say you've just replaced your furnace or you've just redone all of your siding, that we don't want to undo what has just been done. So what we look at is absolutely have an energy advisor do an audit of your home. And this is something that's through the Green Home Grant and Greener Homes Grant. But to look at what is that opportunity within your house for going to net zero. One of the key things that we're also looking at is that net zero isn't the end all and be all. When we look at that, we think that if everybody was net zero, then obviously our impact would be less. But based on the house and based on the capabilities, what we're looking at is what's the next best step? What is the next best step? So what we're working on this renovation pathway is, how do we map out for homeowners how to get to net zero, but then it can be done in the chunks that are actually attainable for the homeowner, where ideal is do it all at once. If you have that financial capability, I personally do not. I would need a lottery win in my favor to do that right now. But what it does do is to have that pathway of what can I do that I don't then have to undo if I go to the next step. And actually, I really should retract that whole lottery statement. That was not fair on me, because what we are working towards and what we are actually proving is that you can get to significant reduction in your energy consumption at not that extreme amount of money. Going to full net zero all at once, that yes is significant. There's, it could be around $100,000 to do it all at once. But if you're looking at where you have to replace your furnace, I know we're working with people out east who are on oil and they're wanting to replace their furnace. If you're looking at, we're getting higher heating, cooling days where we want air conditioning, where we never needed air conditioning. We just suffered through the 2 weeks of hot and that was it. Now it's 6 weeks. Now it's, uncomfortable. If you're looking at making those investments anyway, this is where you start engaging and asking questions about, well, what's the overall plan here? If I'm going to have to spend that money anyway, what's the best rate? And things like that you are going to learn about in the next series, in the next selection of series, like air source heat pumps, where you get 200 to 300% back on your energy of a rate of return versus a 1-to-1 or an 85% rate of return. So it's things like that where when I say integrated design, it's having that map so that at every stage you go, what are my options within this plan that gets me on better energy efficiency, improves my house, right? It upgrades my house. It gives me a better indoor environment, and it's in line with the next steps, and I can continually improve. That was a bit of a long answer, but
Thank
does
you.
that?
There is another great question in the chat, but I just wanted to quickly mention that you said the first step was an EnerGuide audit, and we at Lynne are providing those now.
Okay, wonderful.
So in London, for London residents, you need to pay for it up front and then you're reimbursed. And for First Nation folks, you can have it covered and you don't need to pay for it up front. So I just wanted
that is amazing, because that is the common language, which, you know, from there, then you can, it gives you a path, it gives you what your house is, but that is fantastic. That is fantastic.
So Jamie has just put the link for that service in the chat. I also wanted to point out that the Chippewas of the Thames First Nation community in the energy plan and other similar neighboring First Nations communities are reliant on propane, which makes the conversion more meaningful in terms of greenhouse gas emission reductions and cost savings. So a lot of the information that you're going to see out in the land of the internet will be comparing costs of natural gas, which are significantly cheaper than propane. So usually the case and the incentives are better if you are propane reliant. So I just wanted to mention that as well.
That's a good point.
Here is the next question from the chat, and it is from Hanyu. Are there any future directives from the Canadian Home Builders Association Net Zero team that are aimed at improving the affordability of home retrofitting opportunities for low-income groups? And are there any goals aimed at making home retrofitting opportunities more available to tenants living in multi-residential buildings? So low-income and multi-unit residential buildings.
And can you repeat the second half specifically about the multi-units?
Are there any goals at making the opportunities more available, the retrofitting opportunities more available to tenants?
So yes and yes. And in the program that we have, that I'm running with the Canada-wide program, we have some cities that have different models. Some are going with affordable housing, and that's where they're wanting to participate, is with affordable housing stock. And other ones are going with single family, and other ones are going with a mix of both. It is important that affordability and access to quality housing, to good indoor environments, is across the board, right? That it is not for market rate housing only, that this is applied to low income housing as much as anywhere else. And especially when we look at operational costs, where that has a day-to-day incredible impact. In terms of multi-units, the Marie Hanchett, who was the project manager who led the pilot for the renovation one, is currently working on multi-unit residential buildings and building to net zero for those. So that is absolutely underway. What we are looking at is that will, once that is fully in play, that will lead to renovating our existing multi-unit buildings. So, you know, we're establishing how to build it, and then we work from there, and we work on how to renovate it, because that is a huge opportunity. One of the terms that was used in one of our discussions was the missing middle of that mid-density, where you have high rises and you have single family homes, but what about those groups in the middle of townhomes, stacked towns, and multi-unit residentials?
Great, thank you. And I wanted to add also that locally we do have a new program starting for multi-unit residential called, it's a nonprofit resiliency project. It's not even on our website yet, that's how new it is, but we are going to be taking 30 homes into the program, 30 multi-unit residential buildings if they're nonprofit owned, and putting together a pathway to net zero with them and their building management. So if you're interested or if you live in a multi-unit residential and you have a relationship with the owner or anything like that, and you want more information, you can email me, and our email address will be at the end of the deck. I can switch it there now. And then there was another question in the chat as well. Oh, and I also wanted to just quickly touch base on the CMHC loan that's also out. In terms of affordability, there's a $40,000 zero interest loan that is available if you go through the Greener Homes program through the CMHC, and that's the terms are zero interest in 10 years. So depending on what measures, it can be quite affordable, and it can actually be a cheaper payment than a propane payment, perhaps, depending on the situation in the home. So the first step there is still the EnerGuide audit. You still need to go through the audit in order to go through the Greener Homes program, in order to go through the CMHC loan program. So the first step is still that EnerGuide audit.
And I see another question in the chat.
Yes.
And this one is from Kaylee. As someone who, when you don't have a lot of money at the moment, what are some ways that we can improve a house to be net zero without significant renovations? That is an absolutely excellent, and I think that applies out of the 15 million housing units, probably applies to at least 2/3 of that, where you're looking at what do I do? So in terms of what you can do, one of the first and foremost is home maintenance, regular home maintenance. When we look at gaps in air sealing, when we look at the drafts that cause, so it's things like the mundane, they're simple, but they're laborious sometimes, but things like, you know, caulking around the windows, keeping the integrity of the house as sound as possible. That's one of the first rounds of protecting the house and protecting it from the elements so that it can then do better for you in that. The other part is when you're looking at how to gradually increment, this is where that energy audit really comes into play, because not only do you get this is where I am and this is what I've got in terms of my energy consumption, it provides you with where your best rate of return investments are from that. But then also for organizations like the London Environmental Network and coordination, what we're finding across the entire nation is that one of the first and foremost asks is for this energy coach, this rebate concierge, somebody to help you figure out where you can access resources and where you can access knowledge in terms of how to best use those resources. So that's, I'm hoping that gives some kind of intro, kind of foundation ones on that aspect, because that is a situation where you're wanting to act on it, and then it does take an investment. So where can you access those resources and know how to best use them for your particular home?
Thank you very much, Lynn. I've had a lot of folks, because air sealing is generally the first step anyway, and it can be done fairly cost effectively if you know what to look for. And the next session tomorrow is air sealing and insulation, which is generally the first couple of steps, and they're pretty well incentivized with the new Greener Homes incentive. So you can sometimes get it done for almost nothing if your home is in the right state. But again, an energy advisor would have to let you know that. But we are doing air sealing and insulation tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel.
Do you know, and I'll share with you by email if you're able to share with the group, but we have short videos on the building envelope and the mechanical systems as well that help give that, just really, it's their 2-minute videos to give an overview of how they come into play and in that whole system.
Awesome, that would be great. Yeah, we'll send out an email with all the links we've discussed and the video that wouldn't play, as well as some LEN resources too. So I don't know if there's any more questions. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to add or say or ask while we're here? Okay, I think that's it. Lynn, thank you so much for coming and
Thank you very much.
sharing that with us. So we are going to be putting you on YouTube, so prepare for fame and glory. So if anyone needs any more information, they can always refer back to it once we get it loaded. So we'll send that out. And thanks everyone for your time. We'll see you tomorrow.